Saddam probably figured the Arab world and the world at large would bitch and moan for a couple of days, and then people would get used to it. And the world would essentially learn to live with it. And the United States, which had left Lebanon a decade before and so forth, was not going to do anything. And even if the United States wanted to do something, the local Arabs would never do anything. They would never work with the United States and stand up to Saddam. So I think Saddam took the pretty intelligent decision that he could probably get away with it.
President, yeah, Helen.
Do you contemplate intervention as one of your options?
We're not discussing intervention. I would not discuss any military options, even if we'd agreed upon them. But one of the things...
The president summoned his National Security Council to confront the crisis. But Bush's confused statement to the press set the tone for the subsequent meeting. It was rambling and inconclusive.
And
we really needed some time to come to grips with this basic fundamental question of our strategic assessment of what this meant. Did it matter that he'd taken Kuwait?
The notion of Iraq, which was an oil powerhouse in itself, acquiring the Kuwaiti resources, and thus perhaps being able to dominate OPEC, was a tremendous danger to the United States and to the industrialized world. I thought it made a lot of difference.
To put it bluntly, what we ultimately did, sending 500,000 people around the world and all that entailed, that was too big of a thought for people at that first meeting even to think about. So instead, you had people talking all over the place, many of whom were talking about how we could live with this.
The president left to give a speech in Aspen. Brent Scowcroft traveled with him.
The president was way out in front of most of his advisors. He felt the same way I did about the sort of resigned tone of the meeting, and that there was no sense of outrage or no sense of imperative.
Waiting in Aspen for the president was the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. The victor in the Falklands was already thinking about war.
George Bush just said to me, Margaret, what is your view? And so indeed I told him that aggressors must be stopped. Not only stopped, but they must be thrown out. An aggressor cannot gain from his aggression. He must be thrown out. And really, by that time in my mind, I thought we ought to throw him out so decisively that he could never think of doing it again.
It was like two soulmates finding each other. They found from the very first words that they were exactly on the same wavelength, that this was a tremendously serious event, that it could not be tolerated, and something had to be done.
The president said little to the press, but he was already thinking about military action. Thatcher remembers telling him Saddam was a potential Hitler who must be stopped. Both leaders drew their history lessons from World War II.
Don't forget, George Bush fought bravely in the last war. He knew what it was like to fight. He was injured. So he knew that if you didn't turn out an aggressor, then you could have simply terrible consequences for future generations.